Okay, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply fascinating, wonderfully weird, and just entirely human mystery. We're going to explore the unexpected psychobiology of taking our clothes off. Right? It's really a story about how shedding our physical layers might actually be the biological key to shedding our psychological ones. We're going to go on this wild journey that takes us from some truly bizarre psychology experiments in the 1960s, through some spectacular scientific dead ends, straight into modern clinical trials, and finally, to a massive cultural shift that's happening right now on beaches and hiking trails all around the world.
Okay, let's dive right into this with a piece of real-world evidence. Just look at this actual, genuine invitation from the VanTan Naturist Club up in North Vancouver. They're hosting open houses, bringing in fresh faces, trying to get new members into their community. And, it sounds kind of quaint, right? Just a traditional gated club trying to keep its doors open. But this earnest little invitation actually masks a massive paradox that is completely baffling the traditional naturist community right now.
So, here is that paradox. Across the globe, traditional nudist club memberships, the places with physical gates, strict committees, annual membership cards, they've been quietly sliding for years. The narrative you always hear is that Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z just aren't into this lifestyle. But, and here's the catch, if you leave that VanTan club and just walk across the water to Wreck Beach, you will find it completely packed. I mean, booming with young people. The exact same thing is happening at Hollow over in Miami or Hippie Hollow down in Austin. The traditional clubs might be struggling, but the beaches, they are absolutely thriving. So to understand why this generation is rejecting the gates but flocking to the open sand, we actually have to take a little detour back in time. To really grasp the science of what we call the unarmored self, we have to look at psychology's incredibly messy, super controversial experiment with nudity. It actually started as this mild academic theory way back in 1933 when a former APA president, Howard Warren, wrote about the therapeutic value of social nudism. But it wasn't until the late 1960s that things got truly wild. Enter a clinical psychologist named Paul Bindrum. Bindrum noticed something bizarre happening during his grueling, emotionally exhausting group therapy sessions. He saw that his clients would sometimes spontaneously just want to take their clothes off and jump into a pool. And with the sheer audacity of the 60s, he hypothesized that if you actually forced nudity early on, you could rapidly accelerate emotional openness.
So Bindrum created what he called nude marathons. Just picture this setup for a second. You have 15 to 25 completely clothed strangers, teachers, nurses, salesmen, walking into a room. The sheer awkwardness is off the charts. They start with an exercise he called eyeballing, which is exactly what it sounds like. Staring deeply into each other's eyes at incredibly close range just to break the ice. Eventually, they transition to a swimming pool heated to exactly 102 degrees, and everybody strips down. Bindrum had become obsessed with this psychological buzzword of the time, character armor. He believed our clothing acted as sensory isolation, and by basically forcing people to remove it, he could aggressively break down their negative self-image and strip away that defensive emotional armor.
Well, this bold movement spectacularly crashed and burned. As the years went on, Bindrum totally fell victim to his own hubris. He started making these increasingly outlandish, totally undocumented claims. I mean, he was insisting his new therapy could cure everything from impotence to arthritis. No way, right? Naturally, serious questions popped up about his motives, especially as he gained massive fame and fortune. In this desperate, almost comical attempt to save his practice in the 70s, he even tried to rebrand it as Aqua Energetics, which completely flopped. By the 1980s, major psychological associations officially declared nude therapy to be unethical. And just like that, the experiment was dead.
But now, what's really interesting about this slide is the twist in our story. Because while Bindrum's methods were, let's face it, incredibly flawed and super fraught with ego, his foundational idea that clothing acts as a physical and emotional armor, and shedding it can lead to this profound psychological release, it actually held serious scientific weight. The core concept wasn't wrong at all. It just took decades for rigorous empirical science to finally catch up and prove it without all that messy ethical baggage.
Which brings us squarely into the modern era, and face to face with a crucial epidemic we have today. Social physique anxiety. This is that hypervigilant, sometimes absolutely crushing distress about how other people are perceiving your body. It is a massive driver of modern mental health struggles, fueling everything from depression to eating disorders. Recently, a researcher named Dr. Keon made a bold, almost crazy leap in modern academia. He decided to scientifically test if communal nudity, the very thing that got those 1960s psychologists into so much hot water, could actually be the cure for this exact anxiety. So Dr. West organized the first ever randomized controlled trial of communal nudity. He took 51 participants in London, 27 men, 24 women, and divided them into 2 groups. Honestly, imagine walking into that room for the sake of science. They were simply asked to just hang out together. The control group socialized fully clothed. The experimental group was asked to socialize entirely naked. There was no intensive therapy, no 102-degree pools, no forced eyeballing. It was literally just everyday strangers hanging out in a normal room.
The results? They were profound. This was the massive aha moment for the researchers. The naked group showed a significant, measurable drop in social physique anxiety, which directly led to a big increase in their own body appreciation. It turns out, simply being naked in a safe, non-sexual space, surrounded by real, unedited human bodies, acted as a powerful antidote to the toxic, idealized standards we see plastered all over our media. But how does this actually work? Like, what is physically happening inside the brain and body?
To understand the how, we have to break down the psychobiology. And don't worry, I promise to keep it simple. When we are in our clothed or armored state, our brains are often trapped by cultural expectations. We're constantly self-monitoring. Does this look right? Is this flattering? This external monitoring can actually keep our autonomic nervous system stuck in a state of sympathetic hyperarousal. That's basically your brain humming in a constant, low-level state of fight or flight. You're always slightly on guard. But in the unarmed, natural state, the brain completely shifts. Attention moves away from external judgment and tunes into internal signals, like feeling the breeze on your skin, noticing your breath, feeling your heartbeat.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because to really grasp this, we have to look through the lens of our own evolution, specifically polyvagal theory. Basically, our nervous system operates on a hierarchy. At the very bottom is the dorsal vagal freeze response. Right above that is the sympathetic fight-or-flight response, and at the very top is the ventral vagal system. This is the one that governs social engagement and feelings of safety. When you remove your clothing in a safe, communal environment, something absolutely amazing happens. You remove the primary barrier to sensory connection. The human skin literally acts as a social organ. It picks up cues of safety from the environment and from the people around you, which actively downregulates your stress hormones and pushes your nervous system right up into that restorative, socially engaged state.
Now, in clinical terms, this is known as somatic field perception. But in everyday terms, it's simply the sensation of letting your guard down. Without that physical barrier of clothing, your body generates this uncorrupted stream of biological intent. You are sending out and receiving pure physiological signals of safety. This is the very literal softening of that character armor Paul Bindrum was so desperately searching for back in the 60s. It's finally been explained by modern biology. It's this profound mind-body feedback loop that restores our baseline equilibrium.
So the crucial point is, this brings us right back to those packed beaches today. Young people might not be sitting around reading clinical studies on polyvagal theory, but they intuitively understand the mental health benefits of taking off their armor. Gen Z and millennials are facing totally unprecedented levels of anxiety and digital dissociation. And, as this quote from a recent viral Naturist discussion perfectly points out, they are turning to Naturism to protect their mental health, but they are doing it entirely on their own terms.
And this beautifully explains the paradox we started with at the beginning. The old metrics of Naturism relied on finding a walled-off club, paying your dues, and taking on this strict identity label. But the new reality? It's completely fluid. It's this concept called situational nudity. You don't have to call yourself a full-time nudist. You just take your clothes off when the moment feels right. Look at groups like Get Naked Australia. They have exploded to over 270,000 followers online. That is more than all the traditional naturist organizations combined. And they did it simply by promoting body positivity and freedom in nature without ever demanding anyone wear a label.
The culture has just radically shifted. We've gone from shuffleboards at a walled-off resort to paddleboarding naked on an open lake. In the past, the mere act of being naked was the main event. Today, it's just a natural extension of a much larger adventure. It's about hiking, it's about swimming, and most importantly, it's about creating inclusive spaces where clothed friends and unarmored friends can exist happily, right side by side. The movement isn't dying at all, it is just brilliantly evolving.
Which really leaves us with a fascinating question to ponder. Because, we all carry armor. Sometimes it's literally the specific clothes we wear to project our status or hide the flaws we think we have. But sometimes it's the actual muscular tension we hold from chronic everyday stress. Science is now showing us that there is a profound biological relief waiting for us when we finally allow ourselves to drop that armor in a safe space. So, what is your armor?
And how might your mind and your body change if you allowed yourself, even for just a brief moment, the pure freedom to simply come as you are?